Win a Pageant, episode 114. Beauty, Truth, and Grace is your step-by-step pageant training manual. Get your copy of this Amazon best-selling book at winapageant.com/book. Hey girl, welcome back to the Win Pageant podcast. I'm your coach, Alicia Darby, and in this episode, you get an opportunity to meet Alex Wehrley. You're gonna love her. Now, Alex has experience in the Miss USA pageant as a contestant, as a judge, and as a host of the national pageant. So this girl has seen it all from like every angle. She's got a lot of insight and she shares a lot of it with you today in this episode. In fact, I even asked her for her one piece of advice now having been through the pageant in all these different ways. It's really interesting. Plus, she shares a lot of information about how she broke into the entertainment industry to host, like hosting the national pageant, and also many other things, including her own show, Empowerista. So without further ado, please welcome to the show, Alex Wehrley. Hi, Alex. Welcome to the Win a Pageant podcast. It's so awesome having you on today. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Yes, yeah. And you and I actually have not crossed paths in person yet, but because of our work in media and through pageantry, I've been following your journey and your Empowerista mission and brand. And so I'm somewhat familiar with that. But just for the people who maybe they haven't met you yet or are unfamiliar with your brand, could you just fill in some of the blanks about what you do and your relationship to pageantry?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Empowerista is a multimedia movement and mentorship program. And our mission is really to celebrate and empower female leaders in whatever field that they may be in. So we do this primarily through content creation. I interview a new woman every single week, someone who's broken barriers or has really strong leadership skills so our audience can learn from them. And I also do blogging and we do networking events to connect these women because it's so important to have a supportive network and just sisters that get you. So we do lots of networking events and we have different media collaborations. I do one-on-one mentoring for women who want to build their personal brand. But this really was developed out of a long journey in media that really started with being Miss Wisconsin USA in 2009. It was my senior year of college. I knew that I wanted to be in the entertainment industry. Specifically, I knew I wanted to tell stories. And I actually would Google these women that I looked up to, like Vanessa Manillo, for example, is someone who is coming to mind. And I found this common thread that a lot of these women had competed in pageants. So even though I had no history in pageants, I decided this is something I wanted to do. I thought it could really help move my dreams forward. And long story short, I did a crash course in how to compete in pageants, thanks to YouTube and any resources available to me. And I won my first try at Miss Wisconsin USA. And just long story short, I met my agent, my first agent, I should say, at Miss USA. He was a broadcasting agent, and I followed up with him and said, hey, what could I do to work with you and to break into this industry? And he gave me some assignments. One of them was to put a reel together. I didn't even know what a reel was at the moment. But I quickly figured it out and made a reel, and that started me on a journey in local news. And so I worked my way up in local news. Most recently, I was a morning news anchor in Dallas for a nationally syndicated morning show. And then I've been out in Los Angeles now for 3 years doing a variety of entertainment hosting. And it was really in Los Angeles that's when I decided, you know what, I want to tell some more meaningful stories and in particular empowering stories for women. So that's where Empowerista was born. So I do a lot of my own storytelling. And then I also host a show called Business Rockstars, where we interview entrepreneurs, and it's multimedia. So we're on TV. Biz TV is the network. We are going to be on the back of Delta Airlines soon.
Wow.
We have a radio show, a podcast. So that's been really fun to be involved in with as well.
Yeah. So you have had such an incredible career, and I love that you can really anchor back to that one moment where you said, okay, how do I do this? And you looked around and you found the people who were doing exactly what you want to do. and then just modeled that behavior. But one of the things I heard from your story that you just shared was your brilliance in follow up. So it wasn't just, oh, I got a crown and now everybody has to invite me to do all these things. But you said to that agent, what is it that I need to do? And he gave you a list of assignments and you actually did them. So can you speak to that that real need of follow through? Because especially in LA, this market is saturated. In the entertainment industry, it is not easy to break in to do all of these things that you have accomplished. And the way you say it, it sounds so simple, but we know there's so much more to it. So can you speak to just really your efforts of follow through?
Oh, I'm so glad that you caught that, because it is so important and is one of the big things that has helped move my career forward, is that follow through. And I think a lot of times the media and society wants you to believe that all you have to do is get discovered, or all you have to do is get this big break. And you hear a lot of celebrities saying like, oh yeah, I was an overnight sensation that took 10 years. Like that overnight was 10 years in the making, And one of those key things to having good work ethic is follow up, because there were 51 girls that competed that year. Many of them wanted to be hosts. Many of them wanted to be anchors. But as far as I know, I don't know for sure, but as far as I know, I'm the only one that actually followed up with this agent and said, hey, I would love to continue the conversation with you. As you heard in my interview, I am an aspiring host. And then we started the conversation, but then it didn't even end there. Then it was, okay, now I need to see X, Y, and Z from you. And I didn't even know what a reel was, as I mentioned. So I had to figure that out. And that required a lot of work, because it required me finding a friend who had a video camera that I could shoot some stand-ups on. It required starting a couple internships where I got paid nothing, but the experience was priceless, and they'd let me go on camera whenever I could, whenever we had a break. So yeah, a lot that goes into making the right connections with people. I always say that having a title, absolutely, a lot of times will get you in the door, or will start that email chain, will get you a phone call, but ultimately it's up to you to sell yourself and to do the work. And another example that is related to that is for this past Miss USA pageant. I was the preliminary host and the pre-show host in 2015. I was one of the main co-hosts, and a couple people asked me like, oh, why, like, how did you get that? Not in a mean way at all, but just curious. And of course there were several things. I've been working on my talent for years. I have a great agent. So there are lots of things that lined up. But one of the things that I feel like is not known very often is you got to ask for it. You got to ask for what you want. And literally, that's what sealed the deal. Sure, there are a lot of other things in place leading up to that. But I ultimately literally said, hey, to my agent, let's ask if I can co-host this.
Wow.
Let's ask if I can host preliminaries. So if it weren't for putting myself out there and asking, we wouldn't have locked me in that position.
Yeah. Oh gosh. How cool. What an incredible lesson. Like, just ask. Oh, how simple does that sound? That's really, and what you said about put yourself out there, oftentimes in the entertainment industry, that phrase is maybe I would almost describe it as being overused, or maybe confused rather, because people don't know what that really means to get out there, put myself out there. But I think based on your story, how I would describe it, I'm curious to hear your feedback too, is that it sounds like you took the risk of them saying no and decided it was worth it to take that risk in case maybe they said yes. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. That's the thing is this industry. And quite honestly, a lot of industries, you're going to get more no's than yeses. So that was, a good story with a good ending. But there have been many other times that I've asked as well, and the answer was no. And that's hard. It's definitely hard. You have to have thick skin in this industry. And like I said, most industries, but it just takes one yes. That's right. Get a really, really good opportunity. And so as far as putting yourself out there goes, I think it's just owning what you do, being proud of it, and making sure that you're getting your talents in front of the right people. And that takes effort. That takes starting the conversation, whether it's on email, in person, at a networking event, whatever it is. And then that follow-up piece is so, so crucial.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah. So I want to talk more about your experience in pageantry, not just of the past, but also more recently. You have actually judged a couple of state pageants in the USA system. I think Colorado and Minnesota were the two that you judged. Tell me a little bit about that experience, and specifically, what were you looking for from a judge's perspective in a title holder in each of those pageants?
Yeah, so I judged Minnesota this past year and then Colorado 2 years ago. And boy, did I get a different perspective being on this side of the table. As a contestant, I think you worry so much about the little details. Did they notice that my voice cracked a little bit? Did they notice that my hair was sticking up a little over here? Or, in hindsight, gosh, I wish I didn't wear that dress. Or all those details, to be quite honest, don't matter. And I think that's the biggest, amazing thing that's so freeing for contestants to know. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have the best body that you possibly can, that you shouldn't definitely think about the dress you wear. I'm not saying that you should not care about those details. You absolutely should care about them. But ultimately, it comes down to we're looking for that girl that has that sparkle, that wow factor, that it factor. Everyone calls it their own thing, but it's that girl that stands out. I think to make it a little bit more tangible, it's that girl who knows who she is, what she wants. She knows her opinions. She's confident in her skin. She has a really, really engaging presence. And then everything's consistent. So what she says and the way she dresses and everything in between tells the same consistent story.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Consistency is absolutely king. And we see that across every area of life. So I'm glad that that's something that stood out to you as well. And then let's talk for a moment about your experience co-hosting the national Miss USA pageants. What did you notice about the women that were competing? Because that's also a very unique view. You don't have the responsibility of judging. You're not a peer competing with them, but you're still sort of a fly on the wall. What were some takeaways? Like, what did you learn from that experience? If you could go back and compete again, how might you do it differently?
Oh, there's so much that I would do differently. Yeah. And yeah, because you do see a different perspective. When I co-hosted in 2015, I was in rehearsals with these ladies, and I immediately noticed Oklahoma, who won immediately. And it's funny because, and I shouldn't say immediately. It was, I saw her photo. Her photo was beautiful. At first glance, I noticed her. She was beautiful. It took 5, 10, 30 minutes to see her in action that I started to be like, whoa, there is a Miss USA. And it was all about her presence, the way she carried herself. So to sum up, my advice for anyone competing is act like a Miss USA the entire time. Or if you're at the local level, whatever it is, act like a Miss Colorado USA, act like a Miss Minnesota USA. What does that mean? She is confident. She has a presence. She's friendly. All those things that we think of when we think of Miss USA, when she walks in a room, she turns heads. And yeah, it's partially her facial beauty and the fact that she's got a great body and all of that and whatever she's wearing. Sure, some of those things factor into it. But when you're at that level, everyone's beautiful. So how do you stand out? It's your presence. It's your confidence.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Wow. So, and then share with me this, because we're going through this experience as you were a state title holder and then competed at the national level. And then you knew that you wanted to be a host, but you had to go through several different things to really arrive to where you are right now. And during that process, I'm sure that there were days I'm sure there were more than just one. There were probably plenty of days where you felt like it was the dead end. Like you were just like, oh, is this ever going to work? Am I ever going to truly achieve this? Is this? am I really even going in the right direction? And, you know, we have those thoughts in our minds. Can you share with me a story about a time that you felt that way and that was so real and yet you still overcame it?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I still have days like that now. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
think we ever really arrive. I think
Hmm.
there's always that gap between where we are and where we want to be. And that's
Yeah,
partially a good thing. That means
yeah.
that we have dreams, that we have goals. And
Mm.
once you meet one goal, then your goal becomes bigger,
Yeah.
So I think that's really important to realize because ultimately, and I know it's a little bit cliche, but it's so true, it's ultimately about the journey and enjoying things. And I think it's important to know why you're doing this. Why, for me, I had to ask myself, why do I want to tell stories? And a lot of it's tied to empowering women. Well, I can empower women every single day, and I don't have to wait for people to hire me. Although I, of course, love when people do. I don't have to wait around for that. So I can find that fulfillment every single day. But going back to your question, right after Miss USA in 2015, I actually had a little bit of a gap there between that gig and the next one. And that was really tough, especially coming off this big high. And actually, I find that a lot after I'm coming off this big high, this big gig, and, you feel on top of the world. And I feel like a lot of title holders actually feel this way when they give up their title. You're coming off this big high, and then it's kind of like, well, now what? like now this is over. Now what's next? And so I've learned just to deal with those moments better, knowing that there's always something around the corner. You just have to have that faith and to appreciate that downtime too. A lot of times it's in that white space that you come up with your best idea. Like, for example, it was one of those times during that white space that I came up with Empowerista, and that's been so fulfilling for me. And that's been something that I've really been able to focus on in the in-betweens.
Yeah, I like that. So, and I can completely relate to what you're describing about coming off the high. Like when something
Yeah.
just went so well, for me, it's like after I finish a big launch or I invite all these new girls into the program or I get excited about whatever. And then it's like, and it's I heard someone explain it as expectation hangover. And then it's like,
Oh,
oh, you
yeah.
get this like almost like a sick feeling, like you just don't want to get out of bed, like you're kind of about things. It's a little like, and I think that it probably naturally has a lot to do with just our adrenal glands needing to be rebuilt, in many ways, or just
Yeah,
physically
yeah,
need to
I'm
recover and get some
sure.
sleep or whatever. But how do you deal, like when you, I mean, obviously now you've experienced it enough to have the knowledge of when that comes, you don't see it as something depressing, you just kind of, experience it and know that it's going to end. But what are some of the things that you do to cope with those moments? Like, how do you live those days?
It's funny. I actually just wrote an Instagram post on this because I had one of those days when I think it was some point last week. And a lot of things. First of all, sometimes you just have to get out of your environment because it's on some days I work from home. And so that can really sometimes make me feel like I'm in a funk because I think you need to just move forward. I think action in general for me is the greatest cure for self-doubt, for anxiety, for just feeling like you're in a funk. So that can literally be action, like getting outside and moving or going to a workout class, or that could be taking action on the next project that you're really excited about and just taking those next few steps. But in general, I would say action. And then the other thing too is actually the opposite. Sometimes you do need to just kind of slow down and tune in with yourself. And only you really know what you're needing and craving in that moment. But sometimes for me, I need to take a step back, and I really like meditation. I like journaling. I'm a big believer in prayer, all those things that help us to slow down, get still, reassess. Sometimes certain feelings you didn't even know were buried need to come to the surface. Or maybe it's just, saying a prayer of gratitude so it can really sink in the amazing thing that just happened, depending on the situation. But it is important sometimes to slow down in order to speed up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So let's talk more about Empowerista. In pageantry, oftentimes we are almost conditioned, not necessarily by our outside forces, but sometimes by our own brain, to when we are interacting with other women, we view them as competition. Like and I think this is just
Oh,
a
yeah.
woman thing, like we have this, oh, we're competing against everybody else. Oh, her dress is nicer. Oh, her hair is better. Oh, she's got a better manicure. Oh, I like how this and that. We always compare, right? And how
Yeah.
damaging that can be, not just to ourselves, but also to those in our environment. But Empowerista is really about the opposite of that. So
Yeah.
tell me about what you have seen in women's lives and how that demon of comparison can be combated by empowering one another.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think anyone's above comparing themselves. I think it's human nature. And unfortunately, with social media, it's become so much easier. But man, it really is the thief of joy. It really, really is, because there's always going to be someone who appears to have it more together, especially when you're comparing your behind the scenes to somebody's highlight reel. But the power really, really comes from, I would say, two things. One is staying in your lane, and two is community, because you really need both. You really need both. Ultimately, all you can control is your efforts and your path. You can't control what the other girl is doing. And that's one of the things I learned in pageants, from Don Baker, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, Don Baker was amazing. So sad that he passed away.
Yes.
So much to learn from him. And he taught me absolutely that only focus on what you can control. The rest is just a time and energy suck. And then the other thing, as I mentioned, is community. You really do need support. That's so important, and I don't think talked about enough. I think a lot of times in society and in media, we like to glorify people who have made it to the top, and it seems like they did it alone. They never did it alone. You need support, if nothing else, if it's just emotional support. For example, my roommate at Miss USA was Miss Iowa USA, and she and I used to call each other and be like, how are you doing with your workouts? Did you journal today? Did you do this and this that, our directors told us we should do to prepare for the pageant? And that just kept me so much stronger as I prepared for that pageant.
That's so great. So who is in your corner now? Who would you say is on your support within your community?
Well, my mom is a huge one. She's an entrepreneur herself, and that's been amazing to just have somebody on call. And my dad's an entrepreneur as well. My mom has a little bit more of a similar business model to me, so I would say that she's more of my emergency dial when I have a question. So that's been really, really great. My sister also is a business professional. I have a partner for an event series I do, Sarah Pendrick from Girl Talk Network. That's been so much fun to collaborate with her. That's another thing about community over competition, is it's more fun. It's not fun doing things alone. So planning an event, and this event series has been just so much more fun with her, the support, the added resources, the added audience, being able to run ideas by her, to share in the workload. All of that has been great. There's a man named Andy Waldman at Focus Magazine. He's a co-founder of that. He helps me produce my interview series and is just a serial entrepreneur and a wealth of knowledge, and very thankful for having him in my life. And I have a lot of girlfriends who have unconventional careers, and they just get it, because that's a hard thing too. When you choose a more unconventional career, sometimes people who are in your inner or outer circle who have more conventional careers, sometimes they don't get it. And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with that. It's just you don't know what you don't know. And so sometimes it can feel very lonely when you're not understood and you're not sharing in your dreams. So that's been something that's been really, really great, is to have those girlfriends that really understand paving your own path so you don't feel so alone.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah, and how did you get that network? Like, can you share more about your, because you can't just let anyone in. And even the people that have quote unquote stature or they have influence, they may not necessarily be the people that we ought to truly let into our inner circle. How do you determine who gets that close to you to influence you specifically versus those who you're like, oh, this person, we need to kind of cut them off, like their negativity or they don't get
Yeah.
me, that type of thing?
Yeah, and sometimes you really do have to cut people off, just if there's toxicity. But to your question, I really go for my gut level. I start that conversation with someone. When I'm thinking about collaborations in particular, for example, people will reach out to me, and if I feel like there's synergy, especially with our missions, that's a big thing for me. If I feel like we have a similar mission, then that's a great start. Okay, there's probably going to be synergy between either our brands or between us as individuals. So I'll start that conversation. And then you really have to listen to your gut. Does this person seem authentic? Do their motivations seem in alignment with what they're saying and all of that. And then you just kind of go from there, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Yeah, because that's really, and especially competing in a pageant, I talk a lot with my clients about having their team, and they really need to create a dream team that believes in their vision. And so, yeah, having the right people in place is so, so important.
And yeah, you touched on a really important thing, vision. It's so important to know what your vision is. And especially in a professional setting or in a pageant setting, making sure the people you're surrounding yourself with really, really buy into that vision and support it. And anytime someone is taking away from that vision, then it might be time to cut off that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, Alex, you are managing multiple projects. So, I'm curious to hear what a day in the life for you might look like.
There's no day, 2 days alike, that's for sure. Sometimes I'm on set in Burbank. That's where I shoot Business Rockstars. Sometimes I'm on set in West Hollywood. That's where I shoot with Focus Magazine, my Empowerista series. Sometimes I'll be traveling because I booked a gig in another city. And then sometimes it's really boring and I'm just working from home. So it's funny. You always see the glamorous side on social media. I'm trying to do a better job of being transparent about sometimes it's just really unglamorous and I'm sitting behind my kitchen table on my laptop and writing a blog post.
Yeah.
But to your point about having multiple projects, one thing that I have found really, really helpful is to time block. So if I do have a free day, I'll be like, all right, from 9 to noon, I'm just working on this project. From noon to 3, I'm just working on this project. I'm a big believer in breaks. So sometimes I'll go do yoga in the middle of the day just to switch it up. But yeah, I'm big on time blocking and big on goal setting. It's so important to know what your goals are, not only for the year, but for the month, for the week, for the day. And knowing that you can do it all, but not at the same time. So if there are 3 things you're wanting to accomplish this year, that's amazing. But focus one at a time. And depending on how big it is, maybe you can focus it one at a time all in one day, and just focus on the one thing in the morning and the next thing in the afternoon. But where it can get really foggy and discouraging is when it's all kind of melting together and it gets confusing.
Yes. So, what are some of the goals on your list now?
Oh, so many things. I want to really expand my content creation. So I'm wanting to turn my video series into a podcast. I have a show pitch that I'm working on that I want to execute. I want to do more events and smaller events like workshops. And I definitely want to start an online course sooner rather than later. I will say that's not on my to-do list this month, but it's in the future. So it's just about tackling one of those things at a time.
Love it. Yes, good. That's a lot to have on 1 month. So I commend you for that. It's plenty. It's plenty. Very cool. Good. Well, I'm just curious what you are most excited about, the awesome thing that you're working on right now.
Whew. I would say this is a timely thing. I'm working on a show pitch. I was actually writing the pitch this morning. That was kind of my big task of the day, was working on this show pitch. And I'm excited about it because one of the things I'm really passionate about is promoting female leaders. And it's so crucial to have them be seen in the media. Historically, often the view of women in the media has been either limited at best or objectifying at worst. And so I really, really want to show women in an empowering light and all the things that they're capable of doing for the dynamic women that they are. And I can't give away too many details, but the show pitch, if it goes through, it will in particular really, really highlight female entrepreneurs.
Wonderful. Wow. Well, that is so up your alley. And you have been doing so much work. I just want to honor you for Empowerista and Biz Rockstars and your passion for lifting other people up. When I envision Alex Wehrley, I envision the concept that a rising tide lifts all ships, and that you absolutely want your light to shine and everyone else's to shine just as bright. Them shining brightly doesn't make yours any more dim. And I just see that in you, the opportunity that you have to always raise up others. So I just want to honor you and appreciate for the work that you are doing.
Thank you. That means so much. Thank you so much. That definitely is what I'm all about. So I'm glad that came through. Thank you.
Absolutely. It definitely does. So where can our audience connect with you more?
So one of the platforms I'm most active on is Instagram. So at Empowerista on Instagram. My website is empowerista.me. Also Alex Wehrley on Facebook and Twitter.
Excellent. Good. And I will make sure to link up all of those in our show notes and on YouTube below the video so that people can access you straight away. Wonderful. Well, Alex, thank you again for being a part of the Win a Pageant podcast. Is there any final little tip or insight or mantra that you want to share with our audience?
Sure. Something I'm also working on right now is helping women more in my mentorship program create a personal brand. And I think that this is just a universal helpful thing, whether you're competing in a pageant, you're starting a business, or you're wanting to advance your career. I don't think we talk about having a personal brand enough. And it really goes back to, I'm sure, a lot of the things that you teach, and that's knowing who you are, what's your point of view, what do you want to talk about, what makes you unique, and kind of what we talked about earlier in this podcast about making sure it's all consistent, everything from your look and your style to what it is you're saying, to how it is you're presenting yourself or relating it to the work world, how you are advertising yourself on social media and all of those other marketing platforms. So really that is my challenge to your audience, is to make sure that they know who they are and they are portraying that in a personal brand.
I love that. So if that is something that they are interested in working with you to further develop, what's the best way to reach you for that?
Yeah, 100%. I would love to help them with that. That's something I'm very passionate about. And you can either go to my website. There's a way of contacting me there. Again, empowerista.me, or to make it even simpler, my email is alex.empowerista@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Awesome. That's so wonderful. Well, Alex, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and your tips and all the lessons that you have learned during pageantry and post-pageantry with all the Win a Pageant listeners. We greatly appreciate you. And ladies listening, thank you for being a part of the Win a Pageant podcast. If you loved this interview as much as I did, would you please share it with somebody that you adore and give it a thumbs up on YouTube? And we will see you on the next Win a Pageant Wednesday. Bye for now. Hey, I've got something for you. You know, in a pageant, the interview is notoriously the most nerve-wracking phase of competition. But it doesn't have to be. It's just that women keep making the same mistakes over and over and over in their preparation process, and no one's ever told them not to. And until now. I created a 3-part video training series for you, and it's called the 3 Rookie Pageant Interview Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. It's totally free, and it's gonna walk you through how to avoid the common errors that everyone is making. Do you want it? Hop on over to freepageantcourse.com and I'll see you there.